Good afternoon, everyone. I know you've been waiting for this moment a long time. Beloved Deepti Naval is here. She needs no introduction as one of India's foremost actors, personalities, someone who has constantly been driving the conversation forward for everybody. Welcome, Deepti. Thank you. And her moderator is Mr. Deepak Talwar, who has been running a absolutely fantastic art gallery here in New York. It has brought prominent artists from India and the diaspora to New York. He has introduced famous artists, and he is also an icon for art in New York. So welcome, Mr. Talwar. Okay, and over to both of you.
Thank you all for being here. It's wonderful to be.
Thank you all, and I am very glad to be sitting here because I've known Deepti almost for a quarter century now, and I in fact remember as I was reminiscing that about 20 years ago I went to visit her and in their family home in Forest Hills, and she took me upstairs on the second floor and showed a window where she had a desk, just set up a desk and a chair. And she said, you know, I want to write a book. I'm going to start right now, you know, at that time. And about 20 years later, so we have a book.
Great.
So.
Oh my God, that's so much for my writing skills.
So I just want to start with a simple question. You've obviously, you know, have a public life. You've been on the screen for a few decades. And so why, and obviously there is a private part which a lot of people make an effort to keep it private. Yes. So why share, you know, the childhood and the private life with the public?
I always thought, you know, Deepak, when I was working as an actor, I always thought that people will know me from the roles that I play. They will know me as Miss Chamko or Sandhya of Panchvati or Kamla or, you know, characters. And they will keep feeling that this is who she is. Okay, this is who she is. That's never the case with any actor. And I thought, how do you get across to people for the real person that you are, unless you write about that part of your life which has gone into grooming who you are going to later become as a person or as a creative person, as a creative artist. So I thought, you know, the best, I mean, instead of writing a regular autobiography, as they say, you know, where you record everything. This is how I came into movies. This is how I progressed, did so many films, met so many people. Instead of all that, I wanted to go back and share with the readers that part of my life, which was actually, I look at it as, I can say it was a splendid time, you know, growing up in a city called Amritsar and having the kind of childhood that I had given to us by our parents. I thought that was really worth sharing because there was so much there that went into grooming you, you know. If there was one thing that I wanted to share, it would be that part, and that was my childhood. My entire childhood, till I was a teenager. That's where my book finishes. It's only the first 19 years of my life.
Well, that brings me to the next one. Yes, there was a lot there which you have shared in the book. So there were moments when I was reading and the level of detail that was there, I felt that I was right there next to you in that space, visualizing what you were writing. So to be able to do that, because you were 4, then 6 and 8, I mean, it can be all from memory. So what kind of research did you do and to get to that?
Yeah, well, there is a lot of memory, which is not recorded now after that many years. I have been putting things down forever, forever. I mean, if I say I started writing 20 years ago, even that's not a fact. I mean, 20 years ago, I wrote the first 4 chapters, yeah? And then I realized, as I went on writing, I realized that it's going to take a lot more work than I imagined. I cannot just say, हम ये करते थे, वो करते थे, बचपन में जब छोटे थे. It's not going to be that kind of book because it has history, it has the political scenario right there behind being a border town and 30 miles away from Lahore and having all those, the impact of the partition always there at the back, So there was a lot of, the more I went into it, I realized that there's so much more work required here. Of course, I had to cross-check. I mean, I was forever calling Rohit, my brother here, my younger brother is here, Rohit. I would call up any time of the day and night and say, Rohit, do you remember? Oh, kis tarah si, how was this, that, and other. And I did that endlessly with all my relatives, uncles who are living in Canada, in London, So the more I got into it, and I thought I was getting closer, the more elaborate it seemed. So I can say I did a lot of work. And I'm so glad it's finished.
Well, but just along those lines, where
The visual, like you said,
yes,
the visual.
because it's like you're describing a knot that was on the rope of a bell, when you were 4, when you would run down.
Yes.
You described the rain when you were a child, I mean, to the detail.
Yes. See, at that time, when you're living it, you are just going through the experience. When you are conveying that experience, obviously the writer in you surfaces, and then you try to recreate for the reader exactly the way you felt inside. If I'm talking about Vuneriai, that chapter about the rain, the monsoon, everything, I am thinking of how it was at that time. I mean, I couldn't write it like that at that time. I can now look back and express the way I remember it. The way I remember it. And now I have the advantage of words and vocabulary. So I can do more justice to it now, than when I was actually experiencing it. But the experience was so stark and so stark in my memory, and so real, still alive, in such a palpitating kind of a way that it was not difficult to recreate it, to put it down in words.
You said you wanted to read.
I wanted to read something from only very few. I have friends here from Canada, from Madison. I have friends from Amritsar here, Kaka, Chota, Alka. Chota has read the book. And so very few people have read the book, but I wish we had copies here. Normally when we do book reads, there are copies and everybody gets to pick up a copy. But now here, it's got to be Amazon. And then they take their time, and then you have to pre-book and all that. So it's a pity that I won't be able to sign any of that stuff. Okay, I'm going to read from when he mentioned the rains and also my school friend Nandini is here. She's somewhere here. Somewhere there. This is a chapter called Neriyai, Neriyai. One particular dust storm when I was around 10 is etched in my memory. I'm on the terrace, enthralled by the spectacle that is beginning to unfold. I see Jeet pulling off the clothes, flapping on the clothesline. Her expression dark and inward. I hear a sharp crack of a whip, then a low hostile rumble, constant and unnerving. A stray kite caught in the electric wires starts to flutter. The sky reddens. The wind picks up, turns into a squall. Rickshaw pullers scramble about in the dust-stormed street. Scraps of paper whirl and tumble madly in the thickened air. I hear Mama's voice loud and clear. Deepi, come down at once. Why? Why did I have to go down when life was happening up here? I stay up on the barsati watching everything and I wait. Now I'll read a little bit from. Another image slowly comes into focus. The sky clouds over as Didi and I wobble up and down the gully. She's teaching me how to ride a bicycle. She holds the bike firmly while I try to mount it. A little boy comes wheelbarrowing and I fall. I try again and I run into a wall. The sky rumbles, the weather begins to change, and we girls rush back home. The rains come to Amritsar in July for 15 days, beating down like Mastana's wedding band. A crack of thunder and the downpour begins. The stormwater pipe from our terrace rapidly floods the courtyard. Mama's Raat Ki Rani slowly wilts and droops to the ground. The buffalo shed, the mochi gully, the Tonga stand at Hall Gate, the mosque, the pigeons, nothing is spared. It pours everywhere. Little boys make tiny paper boats and float them in the streets. The monsoon is here in full splendor. Excited, I run up to the terrace and bundle up under the tin shed, watching the showers slanting in from all sides, witnessing the downpour, its serenade on the roof. The houses are just a blur on the horizon, the terraces lacking all definition. Each bricked edge merges into the next. The city is watercolor washed into the dark gray skyline. I'm going to go into another experience, slightly different. One of my most splendid monsoon nights came to me in the shape of a newborn calf that Charlie gave birth to. Now, when I was a child, I had names for the buffaloes that were just across the house. Buffalo shed tha, to there was a brownie, there was a Charlie, there was a couple of other names, they're all here. So Charlie gave birth to. Late that night, there was a banging on the phatak and a voice called out, "Come, Shani's buffalo is giving birth." Excited, we wriggled out of bed. Mama grabbed umbrellas and covered us in plastic hoods. The lights had gone out and it was raining heavily. We splashed across the gully and lined up at Shani's slushy tin shed. There was Raj Auntie, Krishna, and some mochi kids wrapped in gunny bags. Sardari Lal stood holding a gas light in his hand. In the dimly lit night, we all stood waiting for the moment to happen. With the rain pouring down and the lights flickering, it was a long, stretched out moment when we witnessed a little calf come into the world. His glassy black skin shimmering in the yellow kerosene lamp. Even as Shani was trying to wipe him clean, the calf almost at once opened his huge dark eyes and looked at the world around him. Against the backdrop of a street light, dripping wet, under a cluster of black umbrellas, we all stood gawking at him. Till all of a sudden, he slipped out of Shani's hands and fell to the squishy ground. Everyone gasped. But then, after a few moments of flailing his limbs about, the baby buffalo swiftly swayed upright. Everyone cheered. Fascinated. I was fascinated. I looked up at Mama. Her eyes were moist. She held us close. Didi softly uttered, "So black." And I whispered, "Like velvet." Instantly, the little one became one of my favorite of all the buffaloes. I knew what I was going to call him, Black Velvet. Thank you.
So that was wonderfully written, and that And
Thank you.
so that brings me to another aspect of, or another point. You said that the line between the real, the reality, and the imaginary has always been blurred for you,
Yes.
which, which is an interesting line, but also, knowing you for so many years, I know you would daydream all the time and just disappear in your thoughts in the middle of a crowd even. So, so how much of this book was imaginary?
No. Yeah, there is, I had yes, I mean, every child has an imaginary world. And I was explaining that I had my little pockets of imagination interspersed through the book, and then it kind of unnerved my editor. He said, you know what, you have written such real stuff, starkly real accounts of whatever your memory tells you, and then you go into little things which don't exist. So how are we going to deal with this? And he was ready to pull out all that. And I kind of sulked for 3 days, and then I called him back and I said, I'm writing a chapter called My Imaginary World. It's going to be a separate chapter. It has its own identity. It has credibility because it is all there in the head. So what do you do about that? I mean, for me, it was more real than what was happening around. And this, like what I read just now, this is exactly the way I remember, Buffalo Charlie giving birth. I just tried to, I had to struggle myself. Am I saying the right thing? Am I saying the way I remember it? And I was constantly questioning myself कि मैं उसको कुछ color तो नहीं कर रही हूँ. It has to be I have to be as true to my memory as possible. So yeah, there's an imaginary world. Can I read something?
But then in the memory, there are facts, and how you remember something can be many different ways.
Yes, I think that is the beauty of being a writer. You can choose to focus on certain things because in your heart they are important. So you talk about those and then you leave so much else. Maybe it's not important or it doesn't really make maybe a good read. I mean, there must be so much more than what is here in these 400 pages. Yeah. But that part of your, imaginary world, what did you say? You asked me a question, right? You just now, what did you ask me?
I just said, how much of that book is imaginary?
How much of the book? Yeah, so whatever is imaginary is all clubbed in one chapter called My Imaginary World. And that is the closest to my heart, that chapter. And I'm going to read something which is, between me and my brother Rohit. My mother had 3 offsprings, did not survive. And the boy next to me, his name was Sunny. When Sunny passed away, because they hardly, the babies didn't even make it from the hospital to home. But Sunny lived for 8 months. So I call that chapter 8 months of breathlessness. And I describe, my mother used to forever, she lost other babies, but she could never stop talking about Sunny's death because she had him for those 8 months. So when she would describe how he passed away, then what I want to read is, in my head, how I see Sunny's death is what I want to read right now. That's why I felt the mic thing. So this is where the imagination takes over, and then it gives me, as a writer, it gives me the freedom to interpret Sunny's death the way I always saw it. My mother first describes, that night Sunny died in my arms, Mama recalled. His tiny limbs were burning with fever. His eyes had been looking up at me as if asking, "Can't you help me, Mama? Can't you save me?" That expression on his face I can never forget. This is my mother's narration. I can never forget. It was like he knew. He knew he was going to die and he was scared. I couldn't bear it. That look of his. He was pleading with his eyes for his life. He could not speak. He was only 8 months old and breathless. But his eyes were fixed on my face as the sun went down and night came. That look in his eyes haunts me till today. Can't you help me, Mama? Can't you save me? In the veranda, your father had closed his eyes. Jaap karo, he said. I picked up the mala after Sunny's death, and then I never gave up the Gayatri mantra. His death gave me a lot of strength. I came to know how much suffering I was capable of. From this point in the narrative, every time I have tried to recreate Sunny's death in my mind, I have somehow only been able to see it from the other side. It was 6:30 in the evening when Sunny's eyes finally closed to the world, his little soul rising above the shadowy pillars of the veranda. Trust you, Nono? Shadowy pillars of the veranda, above the blue-green painted windows of the green room, above the open-to-the-sky fireplace on the first terrace. Lightly it moved beyond the barsati, passing by the tin shed, wafting feather-like around the white dome of the mosque, its 4 minarets and beyond. Higher above the gully, the Mochi Mohalla, where he could see the walled city speckled with lights, the sky engulfing it. The wet earth below turning to a mere shimmer. Sunny could see it all now with clarity. His mother and father turned into little specks on earth. 8 months of breathlessness, 8 months of a beautiful woman's warm bosom to bury his tiny face into. All sensations he carries now through the enormous sky. It was a night of shifting shadows. A bat flew low between the cowshed and the veranda. Mama touched her son's body. It was cold. The fever was gone. Life was gone out of him. The pain had ended. His face now appeared peaceful, calm. Sunny felt lifted, swept through a white fog, its cool tingling. The wetness of the white poultice around his forehead no longer made him cry. He loved it, this new feeling of being tossed and thrown on this white foam. He danced about in the clouds, skidding on the unreal whiteness, a white mist that soothed and tingled him, a breeze that drove the pores of his bodiless being wide open. The winds swept him sideways and upside down, drowning him in this blinding whiteness. Sunny giggled, and a soundless ripple ran through the clouds. And then he was swept beyond even the clouds. He now saw a pitch black expanse studded with bright speckles of light. He was enchanted by the radiance and he wanted it. He so wanted it. These were the very stars he had been seeing from the veranda, looking up from his mother's arms. He'd seen these tiny flickering lights in the sky, a sky endlessly fascinating that had been far, far from his reach. But now it was here, so near to him, just fingertips away. It was all around him as he was being swept away towards the brilliance. Beneath him, a woman's heart-wrenching wail echoed in the universe. Mama stood in the veranda of the house, a shriek trapped within her, a shriek only her son could hear. And he looked back, smiling. Don't cry for me, Mama. I'm happy now. Look, the pain is gone. I'm happy. Then her legs gave way. She buried her face in her son's cold, still body and sank to the floor. Sunny laughed. By now he had moved beyond. He had become part of the glow in the sky, was one with the brilliance, leaving behind On his last journey, the echo of a woman who'd been for 8 good months his mother on earth. I also imagine an evening after Sunny's death, I'm sitting in one end of the veranda, and Mama is on the swing, gently swaying. A bat flies low on the dimly lit cowshed, but Mama remains unmoved by it. She's softly singing under her breath, "Hush-a-bye, baby, on the treetop. When the wind blows, the cradle will rock." Outside in the empty street, little boys in red, dressed as langurs, pass by, beating on drums. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So, just listening to that and reading that, I just want to ask about this. When I started reading the book, the style in which I found it to be written was where you are almost describing a set, then you start describing the characters,
Yeah.
and you're almost, so it was like you were writing a screenplay. Or was that just
cinematic?
Was it subconsciously or consciously?
Consciously, because I wanted, the setting of where I spent my childhood was very important for me. It has always been very important. Being in this house, in this large looming house inside the walled city, having the mosque sort of, over your shoulder, the Mochi Mahalla in the back, the setting was always significant, and that's why the various interactions and the various memories from which sprout from that setting. So that was always, I always wanted to, my writing, it just happens, I think, to be visual and cinematic, I guess, something to do with cinema. Hona, it must be that. Because, visual is my strong point, even as a writer. If you were to read my short stories, then, when I describe Tulli, the woman in the red light district that I met, I describe the entire night, I describe each and every gully, and so that you can get to go in there with me. I always wanted to take the reader with me through the corridors of my memory, so that you can just be there with me, So that was always, I always wanted to write like that. I always have written like that.
Well, that did come through, so
Thank you.
it was...
Thank you. I'm so glad to hear this.
No, because there were definite moments, where it wasn't that I was reading, it was I was watching.
I am so happy to hear this. Thank you.
So that brings me to another character that you had, Devi Daya, a friend of yours.
Nita
Devi Daya. Devi Chand, sorry.
Devi Chand, yeah.
Devi Chand.
Yeah.
And then when you visited her in the mental asylum, and then you said that it's changed you and continues to change even after you came to America.
Oh, yes. I think it was... I see it as a very, very significant, impactful encounter in my life, because the fact that she was different from the rest of us, and somebody we couldn't understand. We were all, 13, 14-year-olds, 14, 15. We didn't understand. And mental illness, though my mother had been describing in her Burma stories. My mother was born and brought up in Burma, and then they came over. So during World War II, I'd always grown up on my mama's stories, and that's, I think, where I get the knack of storytelling. And even when she would describe Roland, who was, as a 13-year-old, taken by the Japanese and was kept in those torture camps, and he lost his mind. That story had always intrigued me. I always wanted to know more about Roland, but there were never any other, details coming through. And then when I was in school, Nonu, me, we were in school together. and Nita Devichand came into our class, we found ourselves at a loss because we couldn't understand. The fact that she was mentally disturbed and did get into certain situations, certain state of mind which was difficult to tackle or comprehend or accept, it must have been, it did create a deep impact on my mind, because I think it was from there, I think, that I came here when we moved to America and I joined Hunter College. I took up abnormal psychology as one of my major subjects. So I think it was from that experience. From that experience of having seen somebody firsthand, and then we go and visit her. The nuns put her in a mental hospital. तो उस वक्त पागल खाना कहते थे, for want of a better word. And when she was there, we went to see her, and the place, the way she came across, all that, it was a very disturbing is just a simple word to describe that experience. It was disturbing, and it stayed with me. I mean, so much so that I went on to write a script in the mental institution in Ranchi. I wrote a script. Part of my poetry is all about women in mental asylums. So, I mean, it has stayed in a very strong, that motive has never left me. No.
On a lighter note, so you always were not conforming easily to the norm. So what makes a 13-year-old just decide to go to Kashmir on her own?
I was hoping you wouldn't bring it up. No, this is the last thing I wrote in my book. I was sure that I was never going to touch that chapter, running away from home.
We want more details.
But Gulzar Sahab kept calling me and asking me, "Bachchu, आपने वो लिखा कि नहीं?" So I said, "क्या मैंने मेरी किताब almost complete है." नहीं वो लिखा कि नहीं? So he said, वो जब आप पहाड़ देखने के लिए, कश्मीर के वादियाँ देखने के लिए घर से भाग So he said that your childhood will never be complete unless you write about that chapter where you ran away from home because you wanted to see the mountains. तो इस तरह की बेवकूफ़ियाँ की हुई हैं. So I didn't want to expose myself completely. So you can understand I was evading that, chapter completely. But फिर लिख ही डाला. I said, let's tell the whole truth. What is there to hide? Life is so beautiful. You have such nice memories. तो एक ये भी, let the readers झेलो it. It's not my problem. Let them deal with it. So yeah. I mean, it was, at that time, because I was such a avid movie goer in school. So that time, there were a few years. I'm sure Kaka and all will also remember. No. There were all these films where every song was picturized in Kashmir. तो जब देखो डल लेक में घूम रहे हैं, चिनार के पेड़ हैं, ये है वो है. I mean, here you are in the walled city in Amritsar, with the Mochi Mohalla in the back, and there is another life out there, and you want to live that. Why would you be sitting here? So I just took off. But I reached Pathankot, and then kaan pakad ke I was sent back home. So please read about that chapter. I mean, I've tried to write it as honestly as I could. If anybody wants to. Sorry? Oh, they must have called the police. तो इधर तो police वो चौकी होती है ना station पे. There's always a police. So they saw me wearing my school uniform. So they called my parents. I mean, don't ask me what must have happened on the other side. I've never even thought. Actually, I started thinking, it sank into me only during the writing of that one night experience on the Pathankot railway station. When I was writing it, I was telling myself, oh my God, I never stopped to think what my parents must have gone through. But, I'm not going to talk about that right now. Yeah. It's just convenient not to think. Huh? Yeah. Yeah, after Deepak is... We are,
Start the Q&A.
we are
I mean,
good. How many minutes do we have? Tell me. 15. So, perfect. So I can chat with all of you now. Yeah.
Just really quick. First, I speak for the entire hall. We are a great fan of yours. Fantastic movies.
Thank
Yes,
you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
you know, the Katha person out of my mind.
Okay, chalo. From Chashme Badur Katha tak to aaye.
All right.
Thank you.
Here is listening to you. My lot of questions for you, but I'll ask within myself too.
Yeah.
The first question is that when we think about writing a memoir, even all of us,
Yeah.
say we are thinking of writing a memoir of ourselves.
Yes.
My first thought in mind is that I might be ruffling a few feathers. That
Huh.
means my memoir can become an open chitra of others' lives too. So I have to kind of, trudge the line very, very carefully.
Yes.
And in you choosing to only limit yourself to a childhood,
Yeah.
perhaps that brings you out very safe in some way.
Yeah.
But even in our childhood, our Indian childhoods, especially a girl childhood, can be riddled with all sorts of dark spaces,
Yes.
people, actions.
Yeah.
Were you able to bring those out?
I have spoken about a couple of my memory. See, I have never allowed myself to go into other people's lives and be judgmental about that and say, oh, this was so and so was doing this and that was happening. And no, I have just stuck to, as a child, my memory. So if I've talked about an acrimonious interaction between my parents, I have 2 or 3 memories of that. I have written it from my point of view, the way I heard and saw and was impacted by it. So I've always stuck to my memory, and I've definitely had to be careful not to um, uh, go into what that argument was about, because as a child I don't remember. Later, of course, as an adult, I knew what was happening, but because it was not my memory as a child, so you'd only see it from my perspective.
So you've been able to not demonize it.
I've not, yes, and I have to be careful. I can't tread on people's toes, you can't do that. Even if you're trying to be honest, you have to be honest to yourself. But in the process, you cannot hurt people. It's a big responsibility. You.
Is that because you are being very forgiving, or you are?
No, it's because if you're a sensitive human being, to be able to write a book and talk about all these people, then you have to be a little careful, no?
Okay. Question number 2.
Yeah.
This is about a memoir in Amritsar back in the days. You've used a lot of, native words here. I can see.
Yeah.
Did it ever feel like you might want to write it in Hindi, or do you want it translated in Hindi, or some such?
No, I don't think so. I will sound different if I try to say the entire thing in Hindi or the entire thing in Punjabi, because that's not the way I'm thinking. I'm writing. Of course, I speak fluent Punjabi. I've always spoken, but at home there were 2 languages, na, Punjabi and English. So I don't know, Deepak. I haven't even thought of it whether I would like the book to be translated in any other language. I mean, people think it's good as many languages, but then it changes every time. I mean, it's going to change.
But the thing is, you've always written in English,
I've
whether it's
written,
poetry or so.
except for my first book,
Right.
the poetry. Otherwise, I mean, it's been in English. So I haven't taken that decision. I don't know whether I will change my mind. I don't know whether a publisher may, convince me, or so. I don't know. Abhi tak to nahi. Anybody here? Anybody wants? Yeah.
I'm so looking forward to reading your book.
Please, yes. Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, did you consciously know before you started writing that you would stop at a certain age?
Yes.
And if so, why that particular age?
Yeah, because at 19, my father migrated to New York, and it was a perfect finale for the book, because childhood had finished, completed, even teenage had completed. I was 19 when I left. I couldn't possibly have written more than 400 pages because my publisher was tearing his hair out. He said, when are you finishing this book? When are we going to get it? So I wanted to share my childhood.
Are you going to write a sequel?
Not a sequel, but I will write. I would, yes, there are 4 books in my laptop. So definitely, yeah. Yes. One second. I'll just take that in the back.
The first time I ever saw you in a film was a film called Ek Aur Panchvati. I hope I got the title right.
Panchvati or Ek Baar Phir? Which one are you talking about?
Are there two? I didn't even realize.
Yeah, my first film as a lead was Ek Baar Phir. And then there was a Bashu Bhattacharya film called Panchvati where I play a painter.
So I actually meant both because I meant both.
That's okay.
The first I think is by Kusum Ansal who did this.
Yeah. But we are not here to talk about cinema. Not really, not today.
No, but I just want to say that, ask you that was there anything in, I have read your book, I'm sorry, but I intend to.
Lovely, thank you.
Is there anything in your first 19 years that led you towards making
Oh, yeah.
absolutely beautiful film?
That led me to the to yes, I mean I have spelt it out as and when I go along. In the book I have spelt out what influenced me, what got me thinking, what made me decide that I'm going to grow up. When I grow up, I will either be an actress or I'll become a nun. Yeah, you will see the seeds as and when they are planted, and then you will know that why I'm such a, sort of, kya bolu abhi?
Read the book and you'll know.
Yes, you please read the book, yeah. Yes, tell me.
So the part where you said that you went to see the Himalayas, I felt very nice to be honest because I come from Siliguri, so foothills of Himalayas.
Yeah,
I've
so-
always known not seeing Himalayas all my life.
Yes.
And my husband always says that you brag too much about that place. And I go and tell him that you laugh, at the age of 30 to see Himalayas, that impact it has on people. Probably the reciprocal.
Yes, you can tell him that,
But
yeah.
the question is, do you write during the day or night? Because it's beautifully written.
Whether I write during the day.
Or both.
I keep making jottings and I keep making notes because in case I forget something, abhi kuch cheez yaad aati hai, and one memory leads into another. So I have to keep making notes, and then I know sometimes it's just a one-liner. I'm sitting at the airport waiting for my flight to be announced, and I'm making notes. Of course, I work on my laptop, but I'm forever jotting things down. And then later on, I know this is going to become a chapter or this is going to become a passage. There is no chapter around it, but it is something that I want to describe. There's something that I want to say about this. So constantly, and these notes have been made over 20 years, only in the last 5 years. And the pandemic really helped me finish this book. Yeah, because I had nowhere to go. I just had to finish this book. So the process has been very long. I've sat up at 2:30 in the night. I've sat up and I'm just wide awake because some thought has woken me up and I need to put it down. So I open my laptop and I'm going at it like crazy. When you come towards the final part of your book, when there's a publisher involved and there are deadlines, that's when the writing really becomes chiseled. You try to take out all the unnecessary stuff and stick to the real things. Yeah.
So your passage you read is so beautiful and evocative. When you're writing, I imagine that you're writing in a linear fashion. I haven't read the book. When you put the final piece together, how do you decide?
It's not linear.
It's not, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
How do you decide where to put the important bits first and so forth?
To tell you honestly, I had a wonderful editor and a publisher called David R. This whole flood of memories, I went And I threw them at him. And I said, this is all that I have to say. And he knew that he had to make some semblance, of a book. So it was not working out. It was first written linear. It was not working out. Every now and then I was going back and talking about some film which impacted me. So it was very repetitive. So I had to make, though in the book there are 2 chapters on cinema. There are films that impacted me as a child and then as a teenager. And there were very different kinds of films, So he's the one who gave a structure and form. He clubbed chapters together. And the last thing, of course, I put in was my imaginary world, which I spoke about, why that had to go in, because I just felt. But he gave it that structure. He made it into the book that it is right now.
We're being told our time is up, so maybe one more.
Yeah, we just have 5 minutes, maybe.
I'd like to ask you a question.
Yes.
I know your dad very well, and he was a professor, and he also wrote a book,
Pitaji, yeah.
Pitaji.
Yeah.
And I want to know if he motivated you,
Absolutely.
his teaching to you to write a book like that?
He didn't, he never said you should write, but I always saw him writing. He was always in the veranda at his typewriter. And he was a short story writer. We lost a lot of his work, Bhaiya. When we migrated here, we lost a lot of that. All those, it is a big tragedy that we lost out on all the short stories. He studied in Lahore. He was a literature student, and then he was a professor of English all the years that he was in India as well as here at Lehman College. So he taught English all his life. And because he was very encouraging. He was my painting comes to me from my mother and writing comes to me from my father. So, not that he had to tell me, Deepi, you should sit down and you should write a short story or write a book. But he was always encouraging. That was the mahal, na? Mahal hi paisa tha. It was always, you're talking about artistic things at home. Mama is making me sit on the dining table and teaching me how to sketch. And she was a wonderful painter, her work. Yeah. Yeah, thanks. Yes. We don't. Huh.
A quick question. You are a person who has dabbled in painting, poetry,
Yeah.
writing,
Yeah.
also an actor.
Yeah.
What fulfills you the most?
Well, I thought acting will fulfill me the most. I always believed that. But there came a time when I thought that this is not me. I'm playing different characters and they are these other people. It has got nothing to do with me. Miss Chamko is not me. Kamala is not me. NH10 is definitely not me. So there was a very strong need to express myself for who I am, to say what I feel, what is my take on life, how I retain things in my heart and my soul. It was very important to say all that. So I think writing right now, writing is closest. Yeah. Yes, please one. I did. When I came back to join films after finishing college here, when I was able to convince my parents finally, my father supported me. The first thing I did, I said, before I start struggling in this Bombay film industry, I want a trip to Kashmir. And I went for 10 days. I went all by myself. I stayed at what was called the Leela, not that hotel off the promenade, the old Oberoi. Yes. And they had organized for one Shikarawala, Makbul. His name was Makbul. He would take me every evening and made me sit in his shikara. वो pump वाले stove पे वो कावा बनाता था, And I used to just float around for an hour and a half. And there was Abdul, the taxi wala. He would take me to a new place every morning. So after the whole day's trek and whatever drive, kabhi Sonmarg, kabhi Gulmarg, Pahalgam, ye wo, and then we would, then I would sit in the shikara. I had my 10 best days in Kashmir. What? It was better. It was better. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I am very lucky. This is the first time ever, I think, in my life that I'm at at the mic, sitting with the mic in my hand, and my family and my friends are here in the audience. And my brother is here, my bhabi, my niece, Dia, my friends. Kaka, where are you? Can I have a picture with all of us together, please? Before I start doing photographs, Kaka, can you come? Christy, Chota, Alka, can I have you here? Please come, please come.
Can I tell you, you are one of the most joyful, writer. I've never seen a writer be so happy. You just so you feel so much joy within you having written this.
Thank you.
It
Yes,
just shows on your
it.
face.
Yes, I.
So happy.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you for saying that. So we'll do a photograph. I want a family photograph. So thank you.